First, let me create a detailed outline for this story about pretending to be a poor village girl before meeting Fiancé's parents. Jasmine, 29, introduces herself as a successful real estate developer who decided to test her fiancé's wealthy family. Brief mention of falling in love with Andrew despite their different social circles. Hint at her decision to pose as a poor village girl before meeting his elite family. Allusion to the shocking reaction when her true identity was revealed. Reference to unexpected lessons about love, trust, and judgment. Call to action, asking viewers to like, subscribe, and share where they're watching from before diving into this relationship drama. Jasmine's actual background as a self-made millionaire in real estate. How she built her fortune from modest beginnings through hard work and smart investments. Meeting Andrew at a charity gala where she was a major donor. Their whirlwind romance despite moving in different social circles. Andrew's background in an old money family with strong social expectations. His reluctance to introduce Jasmine to his family initially. Overhearing concerning comments from Andrew's phone calls with his parents. Jasmine's growing concerns about whether Andrew's family would accept her. Her insecurities about being judged for being new money. The engagement and immediate pressure to meet his family. Jasmine's discovery of Andrew's family's snobbish comments about her background. A conversation with her best friend Maya about her fears and insecurities. Maya's half-joking suggestion to test Andrew's family's true character. Jasmine's decision to pose as someone from a poor rural background. Research and preparation for the role, clothes backstory. Mannerisms. Creating a detailed fictional background as the daughter of farmers. Andrew's confusion and concern about her plan. Jasmine convincing Andrew to participate in her test. His reluctant agreement with reservations about deceiving his family. Jasmine's justification that this will reveal their true character. Final preparations and rehearsals before the fateful meeting. Arrival at the Hartwell estate in borrowed clothes and an old car. First impressions of the enormous family mansion and grounds. Meeting Andrew's mother Catherine, her barely concealed disdain. Encounter with Andrew's father Richard, his dismissive questioning. Introduction to Andrew's siblings, brother James and sister Victoria. Awkward dinner with deliberate etiquette mistakes by Jasmine. Condescending comments and sideways glances from the family. Andrew's growing discomfort with the situation. Catherine's attempts to educate Jasmine about proper society behaviour. Richard's invasive questions about Jasmine's poor family. Victoria's outright mockery behind Jasmine's back. Only James showing any genuine kindness. Day 2 at the Hartwell estate. Garden party with family friends. Jasmine being paraded as a curiosity among elite social circles. Overhearing Catherine telling friends about Andrew's charity case. Richard suggesting financial incentives for Jasmine to disappear. Victoria deliberately humiliating Jasmine during croquet game. James warning Jasmine about the family's history of rejecting outsiders. A heated argument between Andrew and his parents overheard by Jasmine. Catherine declaring Jasmine completely unsuitable for their family. Richard threatening to disinherit Andrew if he marries her. Andrew defending Jasmine but not revealing the truth. Jasmine's growing doubts about her plan and its consequences. Her mixed feelings about continuing the charade. Formal dinner party with extended family and business associates. Catherine's announcement of Andrew's previous girlfriend attending. Introduction of Eliza. The perfect society match they prefer. Blatant matchmaking attempts between Andrew and Eliza. Richard offering Jasmine a check to leave quietly. Victoria's public humiliation of Jasmine's table manners. Jasmine's decision to end the charade immediately. The dramatic moment of revelation during dinner speech. Jasmine revealing her true identity as a successful developer. Producing evidence of her wealth and achievements. The shocked faces of the Hartwell family. Andrew's mixed reaction of relief and betrayal. Chaos erupting at the dinner party. Immediate aftermath of the revelation. Catherine and Richard's attempts to backpedal. Victoria's embarrassment and anger at being deceived. James's amused respect for Jasmine's courage. Andrew's conflicted feelings about the deception. Jasmine and Andrew's intense private argument. Her justification versus his feelings of betrayal. The deeper issues of trust revealed in their relationship. Jasmine leaving. The estate alone to give everyone space. Catherine's surprising visit to Jasmine's hotel. An unexpected vulnerable conversation between rivals. Catherine revealing her own humble beginnings and insecurities. Richard's business troubles that fueled their obsession with social status. Jasmine's realization about the complexity of family dynamics. Jasmine's reflection on her own motivations and insecurities. Recognition that her test revealed flaws on both sides. Andrew coming to Jasmine's hotel after days of silence. Honest conversation about trust. Acceptance and judgment. Their decision to start fresh with authentic relationships. Return to the Hartwell estate for a second chance meeting. Changed dynamics with the family after the revelation. Richard's reluctant respect for Jasmine's business acumen. Catherine's attempt to form a genuine connection. Victoria's continued resentment but civil behaviour. James becoming an ally and bridge between worlds. Family dinner where everyone shows their authentic selves. 6 months later, engagement party where both families meet as equals. Reflections on lessons learned about judging others. Wedding plans that honour both their backgrounds. Final thoughts on how pretending to be someone else ultimately taught Jasmine to fully embrace herself. Closing message about the importance of authenticity in relationships. Now I will write the complete story based on this outline. I'm Jasmine Reed, 29. A real estate developer who built my company from the ground up. When I fell in love with Andrew Hartwell, I knew his old money family might have reservations about me. After overhearing his mother call me that new money girl on the phone, I made a decision that would either save or destroy our relationship. I showed up at their estate, dressed like the daughter of poor farmers, determined to see how they'd treat someone they considered beneath them. For 3 days, I endured their condescension and cruelty. But when Andrew's father offered me a check to disappear, I revealed my true identity in a way no one saw coming. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from if you've ever felt judged based on where you come from rather than who you are. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle, the daughter of a high school math teacher and a nurse. My parents worked hard to provide for me and my younger brother, instilling in us the values of education, perseverance, and financial responsibility. We weren't poor, but we certainly weren't wealthy either. Vacations were road trips to national parks, not flights to exclusive resorts. Christmas presents were thoughtful but modest. I learnt the value of $1 early. After graduating from Washington State University with a business degree, I worked for a small real estate company, learning every aspect of the industry from the ground up. I lived frugally in a tiny studio apartment, saving every penny I could. At 24, I took a calculated risk and used my savings as a down payment on a foreclosed duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. I lived in one unit and rented out the other, covering most of my mortgage. That first property led to another, then another. I had an eye for undervalued properties with potential and wasn't afraid of renovation projects. By 27, I had established Reed Development, focusing on revitalizing neglected urban spaces into mixed-use developments that maintain neighborhood character while creating affordable housing units alongside luxury options. My success came quickly. By 28, I had completed 3 major development projects in Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver, earning recognition in business publications as a rising star in sustainable urban development. My net worth had crossed into 8 figures, though I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle compared to my wealth. I worked hard and felt proud of what I'd accomplished on my own merit. I met Andrew Hartwell at a charity gala for urban youth education programs in New York. I was a major donor that evening, having recently expanded my business to the East Coast. Andrew was there representing his family's charitable foundation. He was tall, with dark hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Unlike many of the men I'd met in business circles, he asked thoughtful questions about my work rather than talking about his own achievements. "You seem genuinely interested in the actual impact of these programs," he observed as we sipped champagne. "Most people at these events are more concerned with being seen than making a difference." "I believe we have a responsibility to reinvest in communities," I replied honestly, "especially when we've been fortunate enough to succeed." We connected instantly. Andrew had the polish of someone raised with privilege, but none of the entitlement I'd come to expect from people in his social circle. He worked as an environmental lawyer, often taking on cases pro bono for communities affected by corporate pollution. Despite coming from enormous wealth, he seemed to have developed his own moral compass and sense of purpose. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, where Andrew taught me to sail. Cozy dinners at hidden neighborhood restaurants we discovered together. Long conversations about our dreams for the future, our values, our hopes. Within 6 months, I was deeply in love with him, and he with me. It was only after we'd been dating for about 8 months that I began to notice Andrew's reluctance to introduce me to his family. He'd met my parents early on, coming to Seattle for my father's 60th birthday celebration. My parents had embraced him immediately, appreciating his kindness and the genuine happiness he brought to my life. But whenever I brought up meeting his family, Andrew would change the subject or make vague comments about their busy schedules. The Hartwells have been a prominent family in New England since before the American Revolution. He finally explained one evening as we sat on my balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline. They have certain expectations about who I should marry. And I don't meet those expectations, I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite the sudden knot in my stomach. Andrew took my hand. You exceed any reasonable expectations, Jasmine. You're brilliant, kind, successful. It's just that my parents, especially my mother, have very traditional ideas about society and lineage and all that nonsense. Because I didn't attend the right boarding school or summer on the vineyard my whole life, I pressed. Something like that, he admitted, looking uncomfortable. But it doesn't matter what they think. I love you. The issue might have remained in the background had I not overheard a phone call a few weeks later. Andrew was in the shower of our hotel room in Chicago, where we were spending the weekend, and his phone rang repeatedly on the nightstand. Thinking it might be important, I glanced at the screen and saw Mother displayed. The call went to voicemail, but immediately she called again. Andrew had left the bathroom door open with the shower running. Concerned it might be an emergency, I answered. Andrew, finally! Catherine Hartwell's crisp voice came through. Your father and I have been discussing your situation with this new money girl you're seeing. Darling, we understand the attraction of someone different, but it's time to think about your future and the family name. The Whitmores have invited us to their summer gala, and Caroline will be there. You remember Caroline from Princeton? She's recently divorced, and her mother mentioned she always had a soft spot for you. I stood frozen, the phone against my ear. Hello, Andrew, his mother prompted. This is Jasmine, Mrs. Hartwell, I said finally, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Andrew is in the shower. I'll let him know you called. There was a long silence before Catherine spoke again. I see. Please do tell him. The line went dead. When I told Andrew about the call, he was mortified and apologetic. He immediately called his mother back and had a heated conversation I could only hear one side of. He defended me passionately, but I could tell from his responses that his mother wasn't backing down. 2 weeks later, Andrew proposed during a sunrise hike in the Cascade Mountains. The ring was beautiful but understated. A vintage emerald that had belonged to his grandmother reset in a modern platinum band. Even in that perfect moment, however, I couldn't forget his mother's dismissive words about that new money girl. When Andrew announced our engagement to his family, they insisted on meeting me right away. Suddenly, the barriers to introduction disappeared, replaced by an urgent family gathering at the Hartwell estate in Connecticut. Andrew tried to prepare me, describing his parents' formality, his younger sister Victoria's sharp tongue, and his older brother James's more relaxed attitude. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to face, or for the decision I would make that would change everything. The idea came to me 3 days before we were scheduled to fly to Connecticut. Andrew and I were having dinner with my best friend Maya at my loft in Seattle. Maya had been my roommate in college and knew me better than almost anyone. We were discussing the upcoming trip, and I was sharing my anxieties about meeting the Hartwell family. From what Andrews told me, they sound like something out of an Edith Wharton novel, Maya remarked, refilling our wine glasses. All old money and older prejudices. They're traditional, Andrew conceded with a sigh. But they'll love Jasmine once they get to know her. How could they not? Maya raised an eyebrow. Will they give her the chance to show who she really is, though? Or will they see new money and make up their minds before she even opens her mouth? Her question hung in the air, articulating my deepest fear. I took a long sip of wine, remembering Catherine Hartwell's dismissive tone on the phone. What if they didn't know about my success? I said suddenly. What if they thought I came from nothing? Andrew looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, what if I showed up as someone completely different from what they're expecting? Not a successful developer, but someone they'd consider truly beneath them socially. Someone they'd never approve of. Maya's eyes widened as she caught my drift. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting, a test? I nodded slowly, the plan forming in my mind. I could pretend to be from a poor rural background. Maybe the daughter of struggling farmers or something. See how they treat me when they think I have nothing to offer but myself. Andrew set down his glass. Jasmine, that's deception. These are my parents we're talking about. It's a test of character, I countered. If they treat me with basic human dignity when they think I have no money or connections, then I'll know they're capable of accepting me for who I am, not what I have. But if they're cruel or dismissive, then you'll know exactly what you're marrying into, Maya finished. Andrew ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of his internal conflict. I don't know, Jazz. This feels manipulative. More manipulative than your mother trying to reconnect you with your Princeton ex behind my back? I asked pointedly. He winced. That's fair, but still starting our relationship with my family based on a lie. Think of it as an accelerated getting to know you process, Maya suggested. Jasmine can reveal the truth after a day or two. The question is whether your family will show their true colours when they think no one important is watching. I reached for Andrew's hand. I need to know Andy. I need to know if they're capable of accepting someone they consider an outsider. Because even though I have money now, I'll always be an outsider to their world in some ways. If they can't treat a farmer's daughter with respect, how will they ever truly respect me? He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but only for a day, maybe two at most. And we tell them the truth together calmly, not as some dramatic revelation at a family dinner or something. Deal. I agreed, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. Now I need to figure out how to become a poor village girl from... Where should I be from? Somewhere they're unlikely to know well, Maya suggested. Maybe a small town in Idaho or Montana. Golden Creek, Idaho, I decided on the spot. Population 3,000. My parents run a struggling small farm. I work as a waitress at the local diner, and I met Andrew when he was passing through town on a road trip. Over the next 2 days, I threw myself into creating this alternate identity with the same focus I applied to business deals. I purchased clothes from thrift stores, jeans that were a size too large, flannel shirts, and worn sneakers. I removed my carefully maintained gel manicure and let my normally sleek bob grow slightly disheveled. I practiced dropping certain words from my vocabulary and adding a slight rural accent to my speech. Andrew watched these preparations with growing discomfort, but didn't try to stop me. The night before our flight, as I packed my Jasmine from Golden Creek wardrobe, he sat on the edge of the bed looking troubled. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. I paused, a faded denim jacket in my hands. No, I admitted. But I'm even less sure about marrying into a family that might never accept me. I need to know the worst, Andrew. I can handle it if they're snobs, but I need to know exactly what kind of snobs. He nodded slowly. Just promise me something. Remember that no matter how they react, it doesn't change how I feel about you. I sat beside him and leaned my head on his shoulder. I know, and that's why I'm willing to go through with this. Because you're worth it, even if your family turns out to be terrible. Little did I know just how terrible and how surprising the next few days would be. The Hartwell estate was exactly what I'd imagined, and somehow still more intimidating than I'd expected. The long tree-lined driveway led to a sprawling colonial mansion with white columns and perfect symmetry. Immaculate gardens stretched in every direction, and I could glimpse a pool house and tennis courts behind the main building. This wasn't just wealth, it was generational wealth, the kind that shapes itself into tradition and expectation. I drove my rental car, deliberately chosen as the most basic economy model, slowly up the driveway, feeling my heart rate increase with each foot closer to the house. Beside me, Andrew fidgeted with his watch, a family heirloom passed down from his great-grandfather. Last chance to call this off, he said quietly. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Gone was the confident real estate developer with her designer clothes and perfect makeup. In her place sat a nervous young woman in a worn flannel shirt and jeans, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, face bare, except for a touch of lip balm. I need to know, I repeated as much to convince myself as him. We were met at the front door by a uniformed housekeeper who greeted Andrew warmly before giving me a curious once-over. She led us through a foyer with a sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier into a formal living room where the Hartwell family waited. Catherine Hartwell rose first, tall, slender, with perfectly coiffed silver blonde hair and the kind of posture that speaks of finishing schools and debutante balls. She embraced her son warmly before turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. So this is Jasmine, she said, her gaze taking in my outfit with barely concealed dismay. We've heard so much about you. I deliberately extended my hand for a shake, rather than the kiss on both cheeks that would have been proper in their circle. It's real nice to meet you, Mrs. Hartwell. Andrew's told me all about you too. The slight grammatical error was intentional, as was the overly enthusiastic handshake. Catherine extracted her hand from mine with the delicacy of someone handling something potentially contaminated. Richard Hartwell approached next. He had Andrew's height and build, but none of his warmth. His handshake was firm, almost challenging. So young lady, Andrew tells us you're from some small town in Idaho. What was it called again? Golden Creek, sir? I replied with a manufactured nervousness. It's real small, not many folks know about it. And what exactly does one do in Golden Creek, Idaho? He asked, the skepticism evident in his tone. My parents have a farm, though it ain't doing too well these past few years. I work at Dottie's Diner in town. That's where I met Andrew when he came in for lunch during his road trip. Victoria Hartwell, Andrew's younger sister, made no attempt to hide her disdain. In her early 20s, she had her mother's elegance, but none of her restraint. A waitress? How quaint, she said with a smirk. And what exactly attracted you to my brother, besides the obvious, of course? Her glance toward an antique Monet on the wall made her implication clear. Before I could answer, Andrew's older brother James stepped in. Taller than Andrew, with the same dark hair but lighter eyes, he had an easy smile that seemed genuine. Give the girl a break, Vic. She just got here, he said, offering me a warm handshake. Welcome to the madhouse, Jasmine. Don't mind this bunch. Their manners improve after a few drinks. Dinner that first night was an exercise in controlled humiliation. The table was set with china and crystal I could have identified as Wedgwood and Baccarat, but pretended not to recognize. I deliberately used the wrong fork for my salad, drawing a sharp intake of breath from Catherine. When asked about my education, I mentioned community college classes I had dropped to help on the family farm, watching Richard's expression shift from polite interest to dismissal. And what are your plans for the future, Jasmine? Catherine asked, as the main course was served by silent staff members. Besides marrying my son, of course. I've been saving up, I replied with manufactured enthusiasm. Thought maybe I could open my own diner someday. Nothing fancy like this, of course. I gestured at the formal dining room with its hand-painted wallpaper and antique sideboards. Victoria nearly choked on her wine. A diner in Connecticut. Oh, I wouldn't want to move here, I said innocently. I figured Andrew might want to relocate to Idaho. We've got beautiful country out there and everything's so much cheaper. The horror on Catherine's face was almost comical. Andrew relocate to Idaho. But darling, what about your position at the firm, the family responsibilities? Andrew, to his credit, played along smoothly. Nothing's decided yet, Mother. We're exploring options. Options, Richard repeated flatly. I wasn't aware throwing away generations of family connection and opportunity was an option. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Catherine making increasingly pointed comments about the importance of suitable marriages and Victoria barely concealing her snickering behind her napkin. James remained the only one making any effort at genuine conversation, asking me about Idaho and seeming genuinely interested in my answers, even the fictional ones. After dinner, as the family moved to the drawing room for drinks, I overheard Catherine speaking to Andrew in a harsh whisper in the hallway. What are you thinking, Andrew? A waitress from nowhere. Is this some kind of rebellion? Because if it is, you've made your point. Caroline Whitmore is back in town, you know. Her divorce is final now, and she's always had a soft spot for you. I love her mother, Andrew replied firmly. Jasmine is kind, hardworking, and genuine. That means more to me than where she's from or what she does for a living. Love, Catherine scoffed. You're a Hartwell. You can't afford to marry for just love. Marriage in our circle is a partnership, a joining of compatible families and backgrounds. What would we even talk about with her people at the wedding cattle feed prices? I slipped away before they could notice me, my heart racing. This was exactly what I had feared, and in a perverse way exactly what I had hoped to confirm with this charade. Catherine Hartwell saw me as completely unsuitable, based solely on my perceived background and financial status. The question now was how far they would go to prevent our marriage. That night, as Andrew and I prepared for bed in separate rooms, Catherine had made it clear that unmarried couples did not share accommodations in her home. He came to my room looking troubled. This is worse than I expected, he admitted, sitting on the edge of my bed. I knew Mother could be elitist, but this is another level. Would you really be surprised if you weren't testing them? I asked gently. Deep down, didn't you know this is how they'd react? He was quiet for a moment. Maybe, but knowing and seeing are different things. It's harder to ignore when it's right in front of me. He took my hand. We can end this tomorrow. Tell them the truth. I shook my head. Not yet. I need to see how far they'll go. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The second day brought a garden party that Catherine had hastily arranged, ostensibly to introduce me to family friends, but clearly designed to parade Andrew's unsuitable fiancé before their social circle. I was instructed to wear something appropriate for outdoor entertaining, which in Hartwell terms meant summer dresses and pearls for the women, linen pants and blazers for the men. I deliberately chose my most casual outfit, jeans and a simple blouse. and joined the gathering on the vast back lawn where white tents had been set up alongside tables laden with champagne and gourmet finger foods. The reactions as Andrew introduced me ranged from poorly concealed shock to patronizing interest. "And what do you do, dear?" asked an older woman dripping in diamonds after Andrew introduced me as his fiancé. "I'm a waitress at Dottie's Diner back in Idaho," I replied cheerfully. "Best apple pie in 3 counties. "How? Authentic," the woman replied, before quickly excusing herself. I circulated through the party playing my role, while keeping an eye on Catherine, who moved from group to group, always watching me with a calculating expression. During a moment when she thought I was out of earshot, I overheard her speaking to 2 women her age. "It's a phase, obviously," she was saying. "Andrew has always had a soft spot for charity cases. Remember when he was 12 and brought home that stray dog with 3 legs? Same principle." The women tittered appreciatively, glancing in my direction. "The wedding certainly won't happen," Catherine continued confidently. "Richard is having a talk with him about family responsibility. If necessary, there are financial levers we can pull." I moved away, my face burning despite myself. This wasn't my real background they were mocking, but the disdain was genuine. I wondered how differently they would treat me if they knew I could buy and sell most of the people at this party. Later that afternoon, the younger guests organised an impromptu croquet game on the lawn. Victoria insisted I join, though it became clear quickly that her invitation was not kindly motivated. "Have you ever played before?" she asked with exaggerated concern as I deliberately fumbled with the mallet. "We don't have much call for croquet in Golden Creek," I replied. What followed was an exercise in humiliation as Victoria and her friends made increasingly cutting remarks about my technique, my outfit, and my general lack of refinement. When I missed a particularly easy shot, Victoria laughed openly. "Perhaps games requiring coordination aren't popular in diners," she remarked to her friend, just loud enough for me to hear. I was considering an appropriately unsophisticated response when James appeared at my side. "Vic, why don't you go refresh everyone's drinks?" he suggested firmly. When she had gone, he turned to me. "I apologize for my sister. She's always been the most insecure of us," ironically. "Insecure?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "She seems to have plenty of confidence to me," James smiled wryly. "That's the Hartwell way. We cover insecurity with arrogance. Victoria's always feared she's not smart enough, not accomplished enough. She tore through 3 different college majors and still hasn't found her purpose. So she clings to the one thing she knows she has, her social position." "And you don't care about social position?" I asked, studying him. "I care about people," he replied simply. "A trait I get from my grandfather, not my parents." "Look, Jasmine, I should warn you. This family has a history of eliminating people they consider unsuitable. Andrew's had serious girlfriends before ones my parents disapproved of. They've never lasted. What happened to them? Different things, sudden job opportunities across the country, family emergencies requiring their immediate attention. One received a surprise acceptance to a graduate program she'd never applied to with a full scholarship." He raised an eyebrow meaningfully. "The Hartwells have connections and they're not afraid to use them." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I like you, and because Andrew seems genuinely happy with you, which is something I haven't seen in a long time." He hesitated. "Just be prepared. They're not going to make this easy." As if on cue, raised voices floated across the lawn from an open window in the library. Andrew and his father were having what sounded like an intense conversation. Moving closer under the pretense of admiring a rose garden, I could hear them clearly. "This is not a suitable match and you know it," Richard was saying. "What do you think will happen? You'll move to Idaho and become a farmer. Don't be ridiculous, Andrew. You have responsibilities here." "My responsibility is to my own happiness," Andrew replied heatedly. "And Jasmine makes me happy. She may make you happy now, but what about in 5 years, in 10? When the novelty wears off and you realize you have nothing in common, no shared background, no shared values. We have shared values where it matters. Kindness, honesty, compassion." Richard's laugh was without humor. "Kindness doesn't maintain a position in society. Compassion doesn't preserve a family legacy." "Maybe it should," Andrew shot back. There was a pause before Richard spoke again, his voice lower, but no less intense. "Your mother is devastated. She had such hopes for you and Caroline. Caroline and I dated briefly in college, 10 years ago. I have no interest in rekindling anything with her. She's a Whitmore. Your children would have had 2 of the oldest family names in New England. I don't care about that." "Well, you should." Richard's voice rose again. And if you insist on pursuing this unsuitable match, you should know there will be consequences. Financial consequences. Are you threatening to disinherit me? Andrew asked, his voice suddenly quiet. I'm reminding you that actions have consequences. The trust fund your grandfather established gives us considerable discretion over disbursements. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. This had gone beyond snobbery into outright threats. Andrew was being forced to choose between his family's approval and financial support and his relationship with me, or rather with the version of me they believed they knew. I found myself questioning the wisdom of this charade. Was it fair to put Andrew in this position? Was I learning anything? I couldn't have guessed, but another part of me needed to see this through to its conclusion. If I revealed myself now, I would never know just how far the Hartwells would go to protect their precious social standing. As the garden party wound down and guests began to leave, I noticed Catherine speaking intently with an elegant blonde woman about my age. They kept glancing in my direction, and I had a sinking feeling about what might be coming next. My suspicions were confirmed at dinner that evening when Catherine made a surprise announcement. I've invited a special guest to join us tomorrow for our formal dinner, she said brightly. Caroline Whitmore will be joining us. You remember Caroline, don't you, Andrew? You two were so close at Princeton. Andrew's jaw tightened. That was a long time ago, Mother. Well, she's very excited to see you again. She's just moved back to the area after that unfortunate business with her ex-husband. Catherine turned to me with a thin smile. Caroline is from one of Connecticut's oldest families. I'm sure you'll find her fascinating, Jasmine. The implication was clear. Tomorrow would bring a direct comparison between me and the woman the Hartwells considered a suitable match for their son. The stage was being set for the final act of this drama, and I had a feeling it would be more explosive than any of us anticipated. The atmosphere in the Hartwell mansion on the third day was charged with anticipation. Catherine was particularly animated, directing staff to prepare for the evening's formal dinner with unusual attention to detail. Victoria kept shooting me smug looks, clearly aware of her mother's plan to parade Caroline Whitmore as a reminder of what Andrew was giving up. Andrew and I barely had a moment alone as Catherine kept finding tasks that required her son's immediate attention. By late afternoon, as I was getting ready for dinner in my room, my resolve was beginning to waver. This charade had revealed exactly what I feared about the Hartwells' character, but it was also creating real tension between Andrew and his family. Was it worth continuing? A knock at my door interrupted these thoughts. To my surprise, it was Richard Hartwell. May I come in for a moment? He asked with a formality that didn't quite mask his discomfort at being in the guest bedroom. Of course, I replied, maintaining my role as the overwhelmed small-town girl. Is everything okay, Mr. Hartwell? He closed the door behind him and came straight to the point. I'll be direct, Jasmine. I understand the attraction between you and my son. You're a pretty young woman, and Andrew has always had a certain idealism about him. I remained silent, waiting for what I suspected was coming. Richard reached into his jacket pocket and removed an envelope. Inside this envelope is a check for $100,000. It's yours, no strings attached, if you end your engagement to Andrew and return to Idaho immediately. Even though I had half expected something like this, the reality of being offered money to disappear was still shocking. You're paying me to leave your son, I asked, letting genuine disbelief colour my voice. I'm offering you an opportunity, Richard corrected smoothly. This amount of money could change your life in Golden Creek. You could open that diner you mentioned, help your parents with their farm. It's a win-win situation. You get financial security and Andrew returns to the life he was meant for. I took the envelope, slowly opening it to look at the check inside. $100,000. A significant amount to most people, though a fraction of what I made in a typical real estate deal. But the symbolism was what mattered. This was the price the Hartwells put on getting rid of someone they deemed unsuitable. What makes you think Andrew would just forgive you for this? I asked quietly. For buying off his fiancé. Richard's smile was confident, patronizing. Andrew will be upset initially, of course, but he'll come to understand we acted in his best interest. He always does. The Hartwell sense of duty runs deep. In that moment, I made my decision. This had gone far enough. The formal dinner that evening with Caroline Whitmore in attendance would be the perfect setting to reveal the truth. I'll think about your offer, Mr. Hartwell, I said, tucking the check back into the envelope. And I'll have an answer for you at dinner. Looking satisfied, Richard nodded and left. As soon as the door closed behind him, I pulled out my phone and made a call I should have made the day before. Maya, it's me. I need you to send me some files right away. And I need a favor that only a best friend would do. The Hartwell dining room that evening was a showcase of old money elegance. The table was set with the family's finest china and silver fresh flowers arranged in antique vases and candles, casting a flattering glow over everything. I deliberately arrived a few minutes late, having taken special care with my appearance. I had abandoned the poor farm girl look entirely. Instead, I wore a simple but elegant black dress that I'd hidden in the bottom of my suitcase. Not designer, but well cut and appropriate for a formal dinner. I'd styled my hair in a neat bun and applied subtle makeup. It wasn't my full successful developer look, but it was a significant step up from what the Hartwells had seen so far. The reaction when I entered the dining room was immediate. Catherine's eyebrows shot up, Victoria looked annoyed, and Richard frowned slightly. Andrew, catching on to my shift in presentation, gave me a questioning look. But most interesting was the reaction of the blonde woman seated next to Andrew. Clearly Caroline Whitmore. She had been smiling confidently, but her expression faltered slightly at my entrance. I apologized for being late. I said my speech now free of the rural inflections I'd been affecting. I wanted to make an appropriate effort for such a formal occasion. Catherine recovered quickly. Jasmine, we were just getting acquainted with Caroline. Caroline, this is Andrew's friend from Idaho. Caroline extended a manicured hand. Lovely to meet you. Catherine tells me you work at a diner. How fascinating. The condescension was so thick I could have cut it with the sterling silver knife beside my plate. I smiled pleasantly. Yes, but that's just temporary. I have other long-term plans. The dinner proceeded with excruciating politeness on the surface, with Catherine repeatedly highlighting Caroline's accomplishments and family connections. Caroline herself was clearly playing along, touching Andrew's arm frequently and referencing shared memories from their college days. Victoria took every opportunity to emphasize the differences between Caroline and me. Caroline's family has the most beautiful summer home in the Hamptons, she would say, then turn to me. Jasmine, does Golden Creek have anything like the Hamptons? I maintained my composure, answering questions politely while observing the dynamics at play. James, I noticed, was watching the proceedings with growing discomfort, occasionally shooting me sympathetic glances. As dessert was being served, Catherine raised her wine glass in a deliberate toast. To connections that endure, she said, looking meaningfully at Andrew and Caroline, and to knowing where one belongs. It was the perfect opening. I stood up slowly, raising my own glass. I'd like to propose a toast as well, I said, my voice clear and confident. All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from surprise to annoyance, to honesty and seeing people for who they truly are. I set down my glass and took a deep breath. I haven't been entirely honest with all of you. My name is Jasmine Reed, but I'm not a waitress from Idaho. Catherine's expression darkened. What is this? I'm the founder and CEO of Reed Development, a real estate development company with projects across the country. Last year, my company was valued at $70 million. My personal net worth is approximately $22 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's mouth had dropped open. Richard had gone very still. Caroline looked completely confused. I made the decision to present myself as someone of modest means because I wanted to see how Andrew's family would treat me if they thought I had nothing to offer but myself. I turned to Richard, including whether they would offer me money to disappear. I removed the check from my evening bag and placed it on the table. $100,000. That's the price Mr. Hartwell put on getting rid of me this afternoon. Andrew's head snapped toward his father. You did what? Before Richard could respond, the dining room door opened and Maya walked in, perfectly dressed for dinner and carrying a leather portfolio. Right on time, I said, gesturing for her to join me. Everyone, this is Maya Chen, my best friend and the CFO of my company. Maya handed me the portfolio with a barely suppressed smile. I opened it and removed several glossy magazines, placing them on the table. This is a feature on me in Forbes. This one is from Architectural Digest, showcasing the mixed income development my company completed in Portland last year. And this is from Business Insider, naming me one of the 30 under 30 in real estate development. The Hartwells stared at the magazines, then at me, visibly struggling to reconcile the waitress from Idaho with the successful businesswoman now standing before them. Why would you do this? Catherine finally asked, her voice faint. Why this deception? Because when Andrew and I became engaged, I overheard you call me that new money girl on the phone. I needed to know if your objection was truly to my lack of proper background or if it was something else. So I created a test. How would you treat someone you considered completely beneath you socially? Would you still show basic human kindness and respect? I looked around the table, meeting each of their eyes. The answer, unfortunately, was no. You mocked me behind my back. You humiliated me in front of your friends. You tried to push another woman on my fiancé in front of me, and finally you tried to buy me off. This is outrageous, Richard sputtered, finding his voice at last. You came into our home under false pretenses, manipulated us, and now you're judging us. Yes, I said simply, because character reveals itself when we think no one important is watching, and what your character revealed was ugly. I turned to Andrew, whose expression was a complex mix of emotions. I'm sorry for the deception, Andrew. It went further than I intended. But I needed to know what kind of family I was marrying, into what kind of battles I would be fighting for the rest of my life. The room erupted into chaos. Victoria was practically shouting about how inappropriate my test had been. Richard was demanding that Andrew control his manipulative fiancé. Catherine had gone completely silent, staring at me with an unreadable expression. Caroline Whitmore, clearly wanting no part of this family drama, quietly excused herself. Andrew stood up, raising his hands. Enough! His voice cut through the noise, silencing everyone. What Jasmine did was unconventional, yes. But can any of you honestly say your behaviour these past 3 days has been something to be proud of? Can you look me in the eye and tell me you treated her with basic dignity and respect? No one answered. That's what I thought, he said quietly. Then he turned to me. We should go. I think we all need some space to process this. As we prepared to leave the dining room, James approached me. For what it's worth, I think you're exactly what this family needs. Someone who won't tolerate the Hartwell brand of snobbery. I hope you'll give us a chance to prove we can do better. Maya and I checked into a hotel in the nearby town, while Andrew remained at the estate to have further conversations with his family. As I lay awake that night, I wondered if I had gone too far. Had my test revealed important truths, or had it simply created wounds that would never fully heal? The answer began to take shape the next morning when I received an unexpected visitor at the hotel. The knock on my hotel room door came just after 9 in the morning. Maya had gone out for coffee, so I answered it myself, expecting perhaps the housekeeping staff. Instead, I found Catherine Hartwell standing in the hallway, looking decidedly less polished than usual, in simple slacks and a sweater. May I come in? She asked, her usual commanding tone replaced by something almost tentative. Surprised, I stepped back to allow her entry. Of course. Catherine walked in and stood awkwardly in the centre of the room, looking out of place and uncomfortable. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I owe you an apology. She finally said the words, seeming to cost her considerable effort. My behaviour toward you was inexcusable, regardless of who I thought you were. I gestured toward the small sitting area. Would you like to sit? She nodded gratefully, perching on the edge of an armchair, while I took the seat opposite her. Up close, I could see that her eyes were reddened, as if she hadn't slept much, or perhaps had been crying. Andrew and I had a long conversation last night, she continued. Several hours, actually. He helped me see some truths about myself that I've been avoiding for a long time. I remained silent, giving her space to continue. What you may not know about me, what very few people know, is that I didn't come from wealth. Catherine's hands twisted in her lap, betraying her discomfort. My father was a factory worker in Bridgeport. My mother cleaned houses for the wealthy families in Greenwich. This admission genuinely surprised me. I had no idea. No one does. I've spent 40 years making sure no one does. She smiled without humour. I met Richard at college. I was there on scholarship, working 3 jobs to cover expenses. He came from everything I didn't have. Stability, wealth, position. When we married, his family was less than welcoming. They treated you the way you treated me, I realised aloud. Catherine nodded, her expression pained. They made it clear I wasn't what they had hoped for their son. Richard's mother in particular was cruel in ways that still hurt decades later, and I swore I would become so perfect, so irreproachably Hartwell, that no one would ever guess where I came from. She looked directly at me for the first time. When Andrew brought home someone I perceived as unsuitable, I became my mother-in-law. I inflicted the same pain that was inflicted on me. It's inexcusable. I was silent for a moment, absorbing this revelation. Why are you telling me this now? Because your test revealed something ugly in me that I've been hiding from for years. And because if there's any chance of having a relationship with my son and his future wife, I need to start with honesty. She hesitated. And perhaps because it's a relief after all these years to tell someone the truth. Does Richard know about your background? Yes, though we rarely discuss it. It's the great unspoken reality of our marriage. Catherine looked down at her hands. The truth is, Richard's family fortune has been dwindling for generations. The Hartwell name still carries social weight, but the financial reality is far less impressive than it appears. Richard's obsession with maintaining appearances comes partly from his fear that people will discover how precarious our position actually is. This explained a great deal about the family dynamics I had observed. So the pressure on Andrew to marry well isn't just about social status. No, Catherine admitted. Though we would never admit it publicly, an alliance with a family like the Whitmores would bring financial security as well as social reinforcement. She met my eyes again. I'm not telling you this to excuse our behavior, only to explain it. Fear makes people do terrible things, and both Richard and I have been afraid for a very long time. I considered her words carefully. The woman sitting before me was so different from the imposing, judgmental figure of the past 3 days. Vulnerable, honest, even a little broken. It was a powerful reminder that people are rarely as simple as they first appear. I appreciate your honesty, I said finally. And your apology. I don't expect forgiveness, Catherine said quickly. I just want you to know that I see what I did and I'm ashamed of it. Whatever happens between you and Andrew, that truth remains. What does Richard think about all this? Catherine's expression clouded. Richard is struggling. His pride is deeply wounded. But James spoke with him at length last night as well, and I think he's beginning to understand the gravity of his actions. She stood to leave, then hesitated. One more thing. Whether or not you can forgive us, and I wouldn't blame you if you couldn't, please don't judge Andrew by his family's behavior. He has always been the best of us, even when we didn't deserve him. After Catherine left, I sat alone in the hotel room trying to process everything. The revelation about Catherine's background had complicated my neat narrative about the Hartwells. They weren't simply wealthy snobs looking down on the less fortunate. They were insecure people desperately clinging to a facade of perfection driven by fears I hadn't imagined. It didn't excuse their behavior, but it did make them more human, more complex than the villains I had cast them as in my mind. And Catherine's willingness to come to me to humble herself and speak truth suggested there might be capacity for growth that I hadn't anticipated. I was still deep in thought when Andrew arrived an hour later. He looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if some long-carried burden had been set down. My mother told me she came to see you, he said, sitting beside me on the small hotel sofa. Did she tell you about her background? I nodded. It was unexpected. For me too, when I first learned about it years ago. She made me promise never to speak of it. He took my hand. I want to say I'm sorry, not for my family's behavior. They're responsible for that themselves, but for not being honest with you from the beginning about what you might be walking into. I'm sorry too, I replied. This test went further than I intended. I just wanted to know the truth, but I ended up creating a situation that hurt everyone, including you. Andrew was quiet for a moment. Maybe we all needed some painful honesty. My family has been living behind masks for so long that they've forgotten who they really are. Maybe this was the wake-up call they needed. Do you think they can change? I asked. I don't know, he answered honestly. But I do know that last night was the first time in years I've had truly authentic conversations with my parents. Whatever happens next, that feels like a step forward. We sat in silence for a while, hands intertwined, each lost in our own thoughts. So where do we go from here? I finally asked. Andrew turned to face me. That depends. Do you still want to marry me knowing what my family is like at their worst? I considered the question carefully. I think I do, but I also think we need to be completely honest with each other from now on. No more tests, no more secrets. Agreed, he said firmly. And we need to decide what kind of relationship we want with my family moving forward. Do we want to give them a chance to make amends, or do we create distance? I think, I said slowly, that I'd like to give them a chance. Not for their sake, but for ours. I don't want our marriage to be defined by this rift by anger and resentment. I want us to at least try to build something better. Andrew nodded. Then that's what we'll do, together. The next step was clear. We needed to return to the Hartwell estate one more time, not as test subjects and testers, but as our authentic selves, affairs, to see if there was any foundation upon which a genuine relationship could be built. Our return to the Hartwell estate that evening was markedly different from our initial arrival. This time I drove my own car, not a rental, but the BMW I'd left at a nearby garage as part of my original plan. I wore my own clothes, a simple but elegant outfit that reflected my actual taste. And most importantly, I entered the house as myself. Jasmine Reed, successful real estate developer and Andrew's fiancé. The entire Hartwell family had gathered in the living room, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. Richard stood by the fireplace, his posture stiff, but his expression less certain than before. Catherine sat on the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Victoria perched on an ottoman, looking uncomfortable, while James leaned against a bookcase with his arms crossed, watching the proceedings with interest. "Thank you for agreeing to see us again." Andrew began standing beside me, with his hand resting lightly on my back. "I think we all know that what happened over the past few days revealed some uncomfortable truths on all sides." Richard cleared his throat. "Yes, well, I suppose I should address the elephant in the room." He turned to me, visibly struggling with his pride. "Jasmine, my behaviour toward you was unacceptable. Offering you money to leave my son was beneath me as a gentleman and as a father. I can only say that I was acting out of fear rather than reason." "Fear of what exactly?" I asked directly. Richard hesitated, glancing at Catherine, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. "Fear of change. Fear of losing control of a narrative our family has maintained for generations. And frankly, fear of financial insecurity." "Financial insecurity?" I repeated, though Catherine had already hinted at this. With visible reluctance, Richard continued. "The Hartwell name still carries significant social weight, but the family finances have been declining for some time. The estate, the appearances, the connections, maintaining all of this has been increasingly difficult. When Andrew brought home someone I believed was a waitress from Idaho, I saw it as another threat to our precarious position. And when you discovered I was actually wealthy?" I pressed. "It was," he searched for the right word, "illuminating, about my own prejudices and assumptions, and deeply humbling." Victoria spoke up suddenly. "I was horrible to you, really, truly horrible." Her typical polish had cracked, revealing someone younger and more vulnerable. "I don't even have the excuse of financial worries. I was just cruel because I could be, because it made me feel superior, when so much of my life makes me feel like a failure." James pushed away from the bookcase. "I think what we're all trying to say, albeit awkwardly, is that we're sorry, and that we hope you might consider giving us another chance to know the real you, and to show you who we really are beneath all the Hartwell pretense." I looked at each of them, sensing the genuine regret behind their words. They were flawed people who had behaved badly, but they were also Andrew's family, and they were making an effort, however imperfect, to acknowledge their mistakes. "I appreciate your apologies," I said carefully, "and I also need to apologize for my deception. While I believe it revealed important truths, my methods were manipulative and created unnecessary pain." I turned specifically to Richard. "As for your financial concerns, I want to be clear about something. I didn't build my company to buy social position or to support anyone else's facade. My wealth is the result of hard work and smart investments, and while I'm happy to be generous with family, I won't be used as a financial solution to problems that aren't mine." Richard nodded slowly. "That's entirely fair. That said," I continued, "I believe in second chances, and I believe people can grow when they're willing to face uncomfortable truths about themselves." I glanced at Andrew, who gave me an encouraging smile. "So yes, I'm willing to try building a relationship with all of you, a real one based on who we actually are, not who we pretend to be." The relief in the room was palpable. Catherine rose and approached me tentatively, extending her hands. When I took them, she squeezed gently. "Thank you," she said simply, "for your grace in this moment." The conversation that followed was unlike anything that had occurred during my first 3 days at the Hartwell estate. We talked openly about backgrounds and aspirations, fears and hopes. I shared the real story of building my business from scratch, the challenges I'd faced as a young woman in a male-dominated industry. The Hartwells in turn began to lower their carefully constructed facades. Richard revealed his passion for restoring vintage cars, a hobby he'd mostly kept private because it didn't fit the dignified Hartwell image. Victoria admitted she had no interest in the social scene she'd been cultivating and actually wanted to study marine biology. James spoke about his work with environmental conservation groups, which he'd been funding anonymously to avoid family criticism. The evening wasn't a miraculous transformation. There were still awkward moments, old habits that surfaced, then were consciously set aside. But it was a beginning, halting and imperfect but genuine. 6 months later, Andrew and I hosted an engagement party that brought together both our families. My parents, the math teacher and nurse from Seattle, chatted comfortably with the Hartwells in the garden of the home Andrew and I had purchased together. Not as grand as the Hartwell estate, but beautiful in its own right. Catherine had taken the brave step of reconnecting with her own working-class roots, even introducing Richard to cousins she hadn't seen in decades. Victoria had enrolled in marine biology courses at the local university and was flourishing. James had become a genuine friend and ally, often collaborating with me on development projects with environmental components. Richard remained the most resistant to change, occasionally slipping back into old patterns of judgment and concern with appearances. But even he was making efforts, particularly in his relationship with Andrew, which had grown more honest and less burdened by expectations. As I watched our families mingling, the self-made and the old money, the practical and the privileged, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. My test had been risky, potentially destructive, and ethically questionable. Yet somehow it had catalyzed a process of growth and honesty that might never have happened otherwise. Andrew joined me on the patio, slipping an arm around my waist. "Penny, for your thoughts. I was just thinking about how sometimes the most uncomfortable truths lead to the most necessary growth," I replied, leaning into him, "and how people can surprise you when given the chance." He smiled, watching our families together. "They're trying. It's not perfect, but it's real. And real is better than perfect, isn't it?" "Absolutely." I agreed. Real is the only thing worth building on. As we moved to join our guests, I carried with me the most important lesson from this experience, that authenticity, however messy and uncomfortable, is the only foundation strong enough to support genuine connection. By pretending to be someone else, I had paradoxically learned the value of being fully unapologetically myself, and of giving others the space to do the same. Have you ever felt the need to test someone's true character? Or have you been in a situation where you were judged based on your background rather than who you truly are? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life relationship journeys. And don't forget to share with someone who might be struggling with family acceptance or the courage to be their authentic self. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most uncomfortable truths lead to the most beautiful transformation.